Right. So I'll be talking about ticks of Pennsylvania, specifically how to identify them, some about their biology, and how to protect yourself and clients from tick bites. This is geared towards Pennsylvania, but it is applicable to pretty much all of the Northeast, 100%, and even most of the Eastern United States, including areas south of here. So uh, well, the title says Pennsylvania, it is more widely applicable, the information that you'll get today. So there's 6 tick species I want to talk about in particular, the 6 most common that we have in the area. And I'll be going through this, I'll come back to this slide every time we transition between tick species so you have an idea of where we're at in the talk as we go through. So the first talk we'll talk about is right here. These are black-legged ticks. Ixodes scapularis. They're sometimes called deer ticks. However, we're trying to move away from that name, even though it's popularly used, because deer are only one of the hosts that the ticks use. And so it's not a name that's applicable to all life stages and may confuse people because of that. So black-legged ticks are the most commonly found ticks on humans since the late 2000s in our area. Prior to that, there were some other ticks that were more common, but since the late 2000s, black-legged ticks have become more and more prevalent and are now the most commonly found species on people. They're found throughout most of the eastern United States, even out westward into I think they just started finding their first ones in Nebraska even this year, in the extreme eastern parts of the state. So even out into these areas out west, they are apparently still expanding a bit. I'll be focusing, when we do talk about identification, on the adult stages because they're the most easy to identify. Often you don't have to have any kind of magnification or a hand lens or anything. Larval ticks often need to be slide mounted to be identified. So we won't talk about those at all. And nymphal ticks are often too small without magnification to identify. You can get them often with a hand lens or something, but because of that, we'll be focusing on the adults today. So you can see the adult black-legged ticks here. The male is here. You can see that they have this large dark brown scutum, this large plate on the back of the abdomen and the body. As well as these dark brown legs and relatively short mouth parts. Compare that to the female. She still has this dark brown scutum, but the rest of the body down here is less hard and it's red, as well as these black legs. So as far as identification goes, these are the only ticks in our area that have a body pattern and a color pattern that look like this. So if you see something that's brown with red, it'll be an adult female black-legged tick, and then again here's the male with that dark brown scutum that covers most of the body. So black-legged ticks are 3 host ticks. That means that each life stage, the larva, the nymph, and the adult, feeds on an individual host. Once it's full, it falls off that host and then molts into the next stage and then finds a separate host to feed on. So the larvae are here. They hatch out and peak in population in the late summer and in the fall. So we are just coming out of when the larvae are going to be most prevalent. You still might find some of them out there. And then they overwinter as fed larvae. So they'll get on a host, feed, drop off, and then overwinter in the leaf litter as fully engorged larvae waiting for spring to come. Their preferred hosts are birds and small mammals. And so because of this, they're often found in edge habitat where you find lots of small mammals like mice and chipmunks. So edge habitat, places with heavy brush or understory in the forest that also support lots of small mammals. Those are also good places to find lots of ticks because there's lots of hosts. So places that you have a high mouse population or a high chipmunk population, you get a high tick population. There was a study that came out, I think it was last year at this point, that showed that in areas where there is lots of Japanese barberry, which is this invasive bush, it's often planted as an ornamental, but out in natural areas, it's invasive. areas where there's high Japanese barberry, there are higher tick populations. And the idea, well, they didn't prove it in the paper, is that it's really difficult for predators to get into this barberry because it's all spiny and thick to get at the mice. So there's less foxes and less hawks eating the mice in these areas. And so because there's more mice in Japanese barberry, there's more ticks. Black-legged ticks are the vector for Lyme disease. I'm not going to go too much into the diseases that they vector today, except most people are concerned about and know about Lyme. And the thing to say here is that larval ticks don't get Lyme disease from the mother tick. It's not transmitted mother to offspring. So because of that, if you get bitten by a larval tick, there's no chance that it will transmit Lyme to you, or more or less no chance, because they almost certainly haven't fed on another host first to pick up Lyme disease from an infected host. If you get bitten by a larva, you're probably pretty safe. The next stage is the nymph. Nymphal black-legged ticks molt out from those fed larvae in the spring, and they're active throughout the summer. So they start to peak in May, and they're active June, July, and into August. They feed on a variety of small, medium, and large mammals, including humans. And so if they fed on an infected mouse as a larva, they can transmit those Lyme disease pathogens when they're nymphs. Or if they fed on a clean host or an uninfected host as a larva, they can feed on an infected host as a nymph and then acquire the pathogen at that point. And then the nymphs molt out into adult ticks in the fall, and they're active all winter. So adult black-legged ticks don't hibernate. And as long as it's above about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the adult ticks will be active. So if you're, say, a hunter out in deer season in November and it's 45 degrees out, there is a risk of being bitten by a black-legged tick. And even right around the edge of that temperature, so if it's around freezing but a sunny day, there could be warm patches in sunny spots where it's warm enough right by the leaf litter because it's being warmed by the sun that ticks could be active in those sunny patches. So as long as it's about 40 degrees out throughout the winter, black-legged tick adults can be active. Black-legged tick adults feed on medium and large mammals, including humans, and can transmit pathogens they've picked up as larvae or nymphs, including Lyme disease. Black-legged ticks often find their hosts via questing. You can see that here. It's when a tick climbs up onto a short, like a stick or a small plant, and gets out on the leaf. Usually knee height or lower. They can get a little bit higher than that, but not much. And they get on the edge of that stick or that leaf, and they wave their legs around, and they wait for a host to walk by and brush against them. And then when they do, they latch on with their legs and then climb around on the host to find a suitable place to bite. Engorged females and nymphal ticks are often misidentified, even by medical doctors. I've had clients come in and tell me that their doctor didn't want to give them antibiotics for Lyme disease because this wasn't a tick, and then they showed me a fully engorged tick. So just so you know, this is, and some of that's because the photos people often see are unengorged ticks like this one up here, and not the engorged ticks. So this is what an engorged tick looks like if you're not aware. And you can still see the hard bits of the tick. So here's that hard scutum that you can see in the female. Here's the mouth parts. And then you can see the legs coming off. So it's this back, less hard area on the tick. That's what expands when they blood feed and fills with blood. But you can still see all the hard bits that don't expand in the engorged tick. Black-legged ticks can vector a variety of diseases, including Lyme disease, but there's others as well, and things like anaplasma, Powassan virus. Co-infections with anaplasma are reasonably common. So anytime you get bitten by a black-legged tick, you need to think about the possibilities of diseases being vectored. So the next group of ticks are some other Ixodes species that aren't Ixodes scapularis. They're generally encountered, they're less abundant and generally encountered less frequently than black-legged ticks, and because of that, they're less studied. There are color differences, so you can see black-legged ticks are typically pretty dark brown. The females might have this reddish abdomen. The other Ixodes species are often a lighter brown with a lighter tan or brown abdomen. There's some differences in the scutum here. You can see in the black-legged tick, it's evenly rounded on the back or on the posterior, while in these other species, it's not evenly rounded. There's these little scoop outs right here. But if you really want to confirm that it's a different species, that requires microscopic examination. You have to count these spines on the hypostome, this bit of the mouth that goes into the host. You have to count how many there are on there. So it can be difficult to get a species confirmation and separate these species out. That being said, 99% of the ticks, of the Ixodes ticks that I've got in the Penn State ID lab are Ixodes scapularis and not one of these other species. So if you just assume that all Ixodes species are Ixodes scapularis, you're probably pretty safe doing that. So what are these other species? The most common one is the groundhog tick. As the name suggests, groundhogs are their preferred hosts. They'll feed on other medium-sized mammals, though, like raccoons and foxes. They're the second most common Ixodes on humans, and were the most commonly encountered tick prior to about 1990. They do vector some pathogens, but they don't vector Lyme disease. And because they're associated with groundhogs, you might encounter them in places that you encounter groundhogs. So if there's a groundhog living under somebody's deck, there's a chance that they could get groundhog ticks in their lawn, or pick them up somehow from that groundhog that's by their house. The other Ixodes you might encounter is squirrel tick, Ixodes marxi. And again, the preferred host is in the name. They prefer to feed on squirrels. But again, they'll also feed on other medium-sized mammals and humans. They're primarily found in squirrel nests. So you get them most commonly in abandoned buildings or seasonally used buildings where the squirrels have come into the attic. So something like a hunting camp lodge that you go up, start a fire in November, and everything warms up, the ticks warm up, and then start biting people in the building. Again, we don't have a lot of data on what diseases squirrel ticks vector. We do know they've been, Powassan virus has been found in them, but not Lyme disease. We don't have data for other diseases. So the next tick is American dog tick. Dermacentor variabilis. It's found throughout the eastern United States. And again, for identification, they're pretty easy to identify. The males have this kind of net-like or reticulated pattern of white and red. There's nothing else really in our area that looks like this. The females are a little bit more difficult. You can still see that reticulated or net-like pattern of white and red on the scutum here, but her abdomen doesn't have that. You can see there's, it's a little difficult to see in this photo. It's this dark red with these black like lines or patterning on them. But again, they're still pretty distinctive and difficult to confuse with other ticks. And similar to black-legged ticks, even when the females are fully engorged, American dog ticks are the largest tick in our area when they're fully engorged. They're like the size of the last segment of your thumb. They get very big. You can still see the hard bits. So here's that scutum with that red and white patterning on it. Here's the mouth parts. Here's the legs. So you can still like make out the identifiable bits of the tick, even in a fully engorged specimen. Like black-legged ticks, American dog ticks are three-host ticks. So they'll get on a host as a larva, fall off, get on a host as a nymph, fall off, and then get on a third host as an adult. The larvae prefer to feed on small and medium-sized mammals. They rarely bite humans. And they're out pretty much in the spring and in the fall. The nymphs will also feed on small and medium-sized mammals, rarely bite humans, so they're not much of a concern. They're out primarily in the late spring and early summer. And then the adults feed on a variety of different animals, preferentially dogs and coyotes and other things, but frequently bite humans. And they're out throughout most of the summer. That being said, all life stages can survive for up to 2 years without feeding, so you can find any life stage at any time. It's just these are the times that you're going to find most of a certain life stage. The next tick are Lone Star ticks, Amblyomma americanum. This species is found throughout much of the eastern United States. This map from the CDC is a little deceiving, and this one's perhaps a little bit better. Historically, Lone Star ticks have been restricted to the southeast, but in the last 10 years or so, they've been expanding northward and westward. So now, 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't find them in Pennsylvania, and now they're widespread. They're uncommon in most places, but when you do find them, they can be very abundant. We've got a lot of them in the State College area, for example, and they are moving more northward from here too. Again, like some of the other species, they're pretty easy to identify, especially the females. Female Lone Star ticks are red, and they're called Lone Star ticks because they have this single white spot at the end of the scutum. And if you don't look at the scutum, it looks like it's this white spot right in the middle of the body. The males are a little bit more difficult. You might confuse this for like an adult American dog tick. They've got this big scutum with this red and white pattern, or red and black patterning on it. Unlike some of the other species, you can see these kind of the name's escaping me now. These little square ridges at the back of the abdomen right here that will help identify Lone Star ticks. The larvae feed on birds and small mammals. They will bite humans, but similar to black-legged ticks, pathogens aren't transmitted mother to offspring. So even if you get bitten, there's a low chance of disease transmission. Unlike some of the other ticks we've talked about, they quest in groups. And so when you're walking through the woods and you hit a group of these, you get this little ball of baby ticks that gets on your clothing, and then they start to spread out looking for a place to bite. So instead of one larval tick, you get 100, 200 ticks. It is unpleasant. Lone Star tick larvae are active throughout the late summer. Nymphal Lone Star ticks can bite humans. They can vector disease. They're active throughout the early summer and into, or late spring and into summer. And then the adults prefer to bite medium large size mammals. Deer are a preferred host, but they are frequent and aggressive human biters as well. And they can transmit pathogens if they're carrying any. And they're active throughout the late spring and into early summer. I'm actually going to skip these last two species because I want to talk about prevention just for the last minute or two here. So prevention from getting tick bites, there's a bunch of things that you can do. So wearing light colored clothing while you're outdoors will help you see ticks as they're crawling over you. If you wear dark colored clothing, it's more difficult to see ticks on that. And you can tuck your pants into your socks. That forces the ticks to crawl up over your pants on light colored plants where it's easy to see them, instead of being able to crawl up under the pants and up your leg where you can't see them. Long sleeves also help. Again, it's about preventing the ticks from getting access to your skin and being able to see them before they bite you. I won't go too much into repellents, except to say that DEET and picaridin and IR3535 are good repellents for ticks. You put them on your clothes and on your skin before you go outdoors, depending on what you're using. And permethrin is a product that you can apply to clothing. You have to let it dry before you go out, so that's something you have to pre-treat your clothes with or buy treated clothing. Do tick checks during and after outdoor activity. The sooner you get ticks off of you, the less chance there is for a tick bite. And then as soon as you come home, take your clothes off, toss them in the washer, and then take a shower. Taking a shower is an easy way to get a full body tick check as you're cleaning yourself, and putting your clothing in the washer will ensure that the ticks don't get off of your clothes and start crawling through your house. As far as control goes, You can reduce and eliminate brushy habitat, so things like brush piles and thick forest undergrowth. There was a study in 1981 that showed intensive forest management or vegetation management can reduce Lone Star tick populations by 76 to 93%. So going something from like this, which is really common in Pennsylvania, all of this invasive honeysuckle and privet and other undergrowth, clearing all that out to something more like this, that can really reduce Lone Star ticks because you're reducing mouse habitat and small mammal habitat. Removing leaf litter can also help reduce ticks. You can't really do this in the forest, nor would you want to, because that is important habitat for various insects and animals. But in a cut lawn like this, if you reduce leaf litter right along the edge of this, that can reduce black-legged tick and Lone Star ticks, at least in the 2 studies shown here, by a significant amount, up to 100% reduction. Eliminating other small mammal habitat is important as well. So things like stone walls or wood piles, places where small mammals can get in and hide from predators. And then because deer are an important host for adult Lone Star ticks and black-legged ticks, discouraging deer from entering your yard, removing deer feeders, for example, can be a really important tick control method. And then finally, creating tick barriers can also help. So if you've got an area like this that's heavily wooded or brushy, and you don't want those ticks coming into your yard, keeping the lawn short can help, as well as putting in a barrier, something like wood chips or stone chips along the edge of this boundary between the forested or wooded habitat and the lawn where you don't want the ticks coming. That will stop the ticks from coming from that tick zone into where you don't want them. There are pesticide applications. So Met52 was a fungal pathogen that could be applied in lawns for tick control. That's off the market as far as I know right now. You also can apply broad spectrum pesticides. I generally discourage people from applying broad spectrum pesticides like over an entire lawn. But if you know like that bush over there is often has ticks under it, or that wood pile over there is, you know, good mouse habitat, so often it has ticks, spot treating with broad spectrum insecticides can be effective. And then the last couple control methods are these rodent bait boxes or tick tubes. The bait boxes contain a bait, and when the mouse comes comes through there, they get dosed with anti-tick chemicals. So the same kind of chemicals that are in flea and tick control for cats and dogs. The mouse get a dose of, the mice get a dose of that. So any ticks that do feed on the mice die. And then these tick tubes are acting in the same way. They contain fipronil in these cotton balls. The mice gather those cotton up for use in their nests and then dose themselves with fipronil when they're sitting in their nests, and that kills the ticks. There are recipes to make these tick tubes yourself. As far as I know, Penn State is not officially endorsing any of the homemade products, but those are available if you want to look them up yourself. And there is some research going into doing something similar with 4-poster feeders for deer that give them a dose of fipronil. This is still in the research stages, and depending on the state you're in, some states don't allow deer feeding. It's considered baiting, or you have to like pull these up before hunting season starts. So state laws, because deer are a game animal, may or may not allow this if it ever comes on the market. I'm running a little bit over. Shoot. The last thing I wanted to say is that Penn State, if you're in Pennsylvania, we don't offer pathogen testing. But if you are in Pennsylvania, you can contact the Northeast Wildlife DNA Lab at East Stroudsburg. They do offer free tick pathogen screening. They got a grant from the state legislature to do so. Just go to ticklab.org. You click this button, claim my free test, fill out some information, send your tick off, and you get the results within 3 to 5 days of them receiving the tick. I've sent them ticks that I've got, and it's been really hassle-free, and they get it to you really quick. So with that, that is the end of my talk. This is where I would normally take questions.